Perhaps the most talked about team this season is not one of the league's many success stories, but rather its largest failure. That failure was of course the Los Angeles Lakers, and with the Lakers officially eliminated from the playoffs, this means we're now out of this disaster and can now pause and reflect. And as the NBA fanbase has collectively done this, many have walked away with the take that the 2022 Los Angeles Lakers are the most disappointing team in NBA history. If you end up enjoying this video, please be sure to subscribe for more NBA content weekly. Also drop a like, it only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs. The playoffs are around the corner, and once they come, content is going to be in full swing and you're going to basically be getting daily videos on this channel and my second channel, so be sure to subscribe to both. Now, before you get confused, this is not another run-of-the-mill shit on the Lakers video, because God knows there's enough of those, including some from me. And as much as many enjoy relishing in this team's failings, I actually believed in this team and I like quite a lot of the players on this team, so I do not take all that much pleasure in going after them. That said, this video is not strictly about the Lakers sucking, just in retrospect now because we all know this. This video is about what is the most disappointing team ever, because that question is genuinely interesting to me. The claim that it's the Lakers, even though the Lakers are extremely disappointing, that is a bold claim. The league is full of highs and lows, so to have the title of the most disappointing in the history of the game, that's pretty hard to get. So today I wanted to go over some of the other severely disappointing teams throughout league history and see if any of them score higher on the disappointment scale than the 2022 Lakers. I have picked 5 teams to compare them to, and the expectations going into the season are going to be what gauges how disappointing they are. For example, when I asked for disappointing teams, many of you mentioned the 2022 Chicago Bulls, but when you look at their expectations going into the season, a middle-of-the-pack playoff team was their expectation. Also, I dismissed teams where pretty much the entire problem was injury. Now, injury can play a part, as it did with the 2022 Lakers, but for example, like last year's Nets losing in the second round, I'm not going to call that a disappointment because James Harden was playing on one leg and Kyrie wasn't playing, period. Injuries can be a factor, but not the lone reason the team is disappointing. Anyways, let's get into these teams. Let's first start with the team that I compared this Lakers team to earlier on in the season. After losing in the playoffs in a disappointing fashion 2 years in a row following their back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2010, the Lakers got busy in the offseason adding an insane amount of talent. They added Steve Nash, who wasn't too far removed from his prime, having made an all-star game last year, and most notably Dwight Howard. Dwight, at the time the Lakers traded for him, was a perennial MVP candidate and multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year, who had a 5-year run of being a consensus top 5 player in basketball. Do not let people's lame-ass jokes today or the insane snub from the top 75 of all time list fool you. Dwight Howard was that dude. So to add that guy to a team featuring Kobe Bryant, who had shown no signs of slowing down, along with 2 other star-level players in Steve Nash and Pau Gasol, well, it was quite exciting. In fact, this team was so exciting and so talented that many people viewed them as the title favorite going into that year. And mind you, this is with the Big 3 Miami Heat in full swing. Heat-Lakers was actually the projected finals matchup going into that year. A lot of people thought we were finally going to get Kobe versus LeBron in the finals. But as we well know, that did not end up happening because, well, everybody besides for Kobe Bryant fell off a cliff. Pau Gasol slowed down next to Dwight because 2 traditional bigs is counterproductive and redundant, but that was not quite common knowledge in the NBA at the time, and won't be common knowledge in college basketball until 2078. Steve Nash barely played at all, and even when he did, playing the most off-ball he ever had next to Kobe, his value was not what it was in Phoenix. And then most disappointing was Dwight Howard, who, after being again a consensus top 5 player, due to injury didn't play at nearly that level and did not fit well with the pressure in Los Angeles or the pressure of being teammates with Kobe. As a result, the Lakers basically just became a Kobe carry job, and with him being 34 years old, that carry job took a strain on his body, resulted in his Achilles tear, and essentially the end of his career. This team has a serious case to be more disappointing than the 2022 Lakers. However, I would personally say that because they at the very least made the playoffs, I'd give them an edge over the 2022 Lakers as a little bit less disappointing. After Russell Westbrook had his phenomenal MVP season, the Thunder front office did a really good job of surrounding him with a lot of talent while giving up very little asset-wise. Well, actually, what they gave up turned out to be quite a bit, but no one knew it at the time. Victor Oladipo was considered just a good starter when he was traded, and Sabonis had an okay rookie season. So to get Paul George out of those two was a steal at the time. And for Melo, Doug McDermott, and Enes Kanter, again, that is a steal. After having his next highest scoring teammate average 16 in 2017, Russ now had two 22-plus point scorers on the roster. Now, this team was not exactly a title favorite like the two aforementioned Lakers teams, mostly because of the dominance of the Kevin Durant Warriors, but they were absolutely expected to contend for the championship. In fact, many hyped the idea of Westbrook getting his revenge on Kevin Durant in the playoffs. So how did it really go? Well, Carmelo Anthony performed so poorly that he struggled to find a place in the league a few years after the fact. Paul George had possibly the worst season of his prime, still good, not the best though, and Russ struggled at times to adjust to a new team dynamic. This resulted in an under 50 win season when it felt like all but guaranteed for them to hit that metric, and a first round exit to the Utah Jazz, a team that was led by a rookie in Donovan Mitchell. However, even though this team was severely underwhelming, they had lesser expectations than the 2022 Lakers, and they were better than the 2022 Lakers, so don't know that I can say that they are more disappointing. I'm not gonna lie, this video is pretty devoid of history. Almost all of these teams are post-2010. However, the 1999 Rockets are a team that stands out just from the pure amount of talent that existed on the roster. The Rockets, post their 94 and 95 championship runs, disappointed in the playoffs for the last couple of years. The Hakeem versus Jordan matchup between the two best players of the 90s never came to be because in 96 they got smacked by the Supersonics in the second round. The 96 Sonics, by the way, my pick for the most underrated team of all time. In 97, after trading for Charles Barkley, there was a new life in the team, and as a result they made the conference finals, but unfortunately they were ousted by the pedo and the assist merchant. And in 98, they were low in the seedings because Hakeem missed half of the year, and as a result they lost in the first round once again to the Utah Jazz. But in the 99 offseason, a new opportunity arose with the second retirement of Michael Jordan. Because him and the Chicago Bulls were no longer in the way, that meant the championship for that year was completely wide open. And in the case of the Rockets, the opportunity was even greater because they also managed to take advantage of Jordan's retirement in another way. Scottie Pippen wanted out of Chicago, and he subsequently ended up in Houston. This meant the Rockets now had a starting lineup featuring Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley, and Hakeem Olajuwon. However, you're probably thinking, yeah, that's a cool list of names, but this is 1999. That roster is old as shit, right? Well, yes, and that's probably one of the biggest factors that ultimately did this team in. However, it might surprise you to know that that's not really a big problem at this time because there was such a vacancy. And it's not like these players were completely washed. There was no clear contender, and the Rockets had the most talent in the league. However, in a lockout season, they won 31 of 50 games, which put them on pace for 50 wins. They were a top 5 offense, but on a team featuring Scottie Pippen and Hakeem Olajuwon, two players who are in the conversation for greatest defender of all time, they were ranked just 15th in defense. Which, even with them being older, that really makes no sense to me. Like, everybody else on that team universally had to have dropped the ball. And even with their older age, injury was not an excuse, because among their big three, there were only 8 missed games, only to Charles Barkley. But with all of that talent, old or not, they got smacked by the Lakers in the first round, and mind mind you, this was the 99 Lakers, not quite Kobe and Shaq, even if Kobe was playing, so this was not some powerhouse that eliminated them. However, I am again finding myself with the same conclusion, which is, yeah, they disappointed, but they did better in the regular season. They actually made the playoffs, so how would they be more disappointing? The 2022 Lakers might actually run away with this title. The Nets, after being acquired by a new owner in 2013, were looking to push into title contention sooner rather than later. As a result, they made one of the worst trades in the history of basketball. But before we all universally arrived to that conclusion, it was not universally considered a bad trade at the time.
The Celtics, Garnett, Pierce, Jason Terry coming here to Brooklyn. Bill, what's your reaction?
I thought this was 35 cents on the dollar. There's no guarantee that any of those picks will get in the lottery. Look at what just happened with Oklahoma City. They thought they were getting this choice lottery pick. It ended up being number 12. And they're gutting the team. And, it's not like they have salary cap flexibility because Rondo makes big money. Jeff Green and Wallace combined make $20 million next year. So it's not like they're gutting the team and getting to start over. I don't like the trade.
Now, as much as I'd love to shit on Bill Simmons because I don't like him, this wasn't a bad take, really. It was completely reasonable at the time, it just happened to age horribly. Yes, Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce were old, but they were not quite retirement home old yet. Pierce averaged 18, 6, and 5 on really good efficiency the season before, and KG averaged 15 and 8 and was an all-star and an all-defensive member just the year prior. How much was left in the tank by the time the Nets actually acquired them was up in the air. There was very much a possibility that they would just fall off a cliff as soon as they left the Celtics. What they acquired, the players they acquired from the season they had just had, were not guys who were just completely out of it yet. Not at their peaks, obviously, but not bad players to be sure. Now, if these two were the only ones expected to lead the Nets to the promised land, then yeah, that would have been a bad move. However, the Brooklyn Nets themselves had 3 all-star level players of their own. Deron Williams was an all-star just 2 seasons prior, and he had just averaged 19 and 8 on good efficiency. ISO Joe was an all-star the season prior as well and averaged 17, and Brook Lopez made his only all-star game at age 24 again the season prior. So looking at it this way, the Nets just created a team with a starting lineup of players who were all all-stars within the last 2 seasons. There are seriously very few starting lineups throughout league history that if you made every player the peak version of themselves would compete with Deron Williams, ISO Joe, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Brook Lopez. And mind you, this is not Splash Mountain Brook Lopez, this is Postmaster Brook Lopez. But unfortunately, and ironically, this is something we say about the 2022 Lakers, as much as it's fun to speculate on, this team was not at its peak. So every bit of concern about the age of these guys came to be, but not even just age, really every single player on this roster collectively fell off. Brook Lopez was no longer an all-star, even though his numbers were relatively the same to be fair. Deron Williams' averages dropped to 13 and 6. Joe Johnson was statistically the same player. Paul Pierce averaged just 13 points, and KG had the worst fall of everybody, from an all-star averaging 15 and 8 to a 20-minute a night role player averaging 6 and 6. So similar to the 2022 Lakers and the 1999 Houston Rockets, age ended up being what did this team in. And while yes, the Nets did end up making the playoffs, although with 5 less wins than they had the year prior before the trade, being what they gave up to get there, it does put them in contention with the Lakers, I think. And mind you, if you weren't aware, what they gave up to get Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett at age 36 and 37 was Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Marcus Smart. Yikes. I think this team is in contention with the Lakers with that context, but let's move on. Let's talk about the other side of the coin of that infamous trade. Because this team is really recent in our memories, and as you can tell, this video is already running really long, I would like to just skim this one. You know the story. The 2018 Celtics trade for Kyrie Irving after adding Jason Tatum and Gordon Hayward in the offseason. Then Hayward gets hurt game 1, Kyrie misses the playoffs, and the Celtics youth along with Al Horford go way further than anyone expected. Tatum, Brown, and Terry Rozier all proved to be worthy of bigger roles. However, everyone returns from injury in 2019 and the talent does not mesh with everybody healthy. There's conflicting motivations and expectations and chemistry, players trying to get paid, players trying to prove themselves, and as a result, a team most people called the most talented team in the league, which in hindsight was kind of crazy because the Warriors with Kevin Durant existed, but whatever. This team was expected to dominate and easily be like a 60+ win team, and instead they won 49 games, beat a very easy first round opponent, and then lost in embarrassing fashion to the Bucks in the second round. However, I don't think you can claim this team was more disappointing than the 2022 Lakers, and I don't think you can for any other team that I've just listed, and these are the most extreme examples of disappointment that I could find, at least that I am knowledgeable about. If the 61 Rochester Royals were more disappointing, then I must have missed that. The 2013 Nets come a little close just simply because of what they gave up to get there. But outside of that, is there any other team in league history where a majority of fans expected a championship contender and they got a team that did not even finish as a top 10 team in the conference and with a bottom 8 record in the league? I feel like this level of failure is truly unprecedented and cannot be matched. As massively disappointing as these other teams were, it's really not much of a competition. So shout out to the Lakers for actually finding a competition that they can win. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and keep watching music.